welcome to our monthly webinar, today on Presenting with Precision and Poise. My name is Lauren Smith-Petta. I work for Jumpstart as Director of Education, and as always, I'm excited about our presenter and our content today. Today's session with Stephanie Markovic will center around presenting skills for business owners and entrepreneurs like you. Jumpstart offers another webinar series on a different topic every month, along with a variety of other educational programs and events. Visit jumpstartinc.org/smallbiz to explore our services. Before I introduce our presenter today, a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation session will last 60 to 90 minutes. Necessary remaining time will be set aside for the Q&A portion. In your toolbar, you should be able to see an important communication tool at your disposal today, the Q&A. I will be closely monitoring the Q&A throughout, so please place any questions there. At the end of today's session and in a follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey via email. We really appreciate your feedback. It takes about 30 to 60 seconds, and it allows us to bring in high-quality experts like Stephanie to teach valuable lessons for free. Okay, without further ado, allow me to introduce our presenter today, Stephanie Markovic. Stephanie brings more than 25 years of training, sales, and marketing experience to the table. When the time came for her to combine her varied work experience into a second act, a fellow training consultant suggested that she investigate the learning and development field, and the rest is history. Facilitating and training are her passion, and she feels that this is the work she's meant to do. Stephanie has worked with over 1,000 people since 2010 and consistently scores over 9.25 out of 10 for the programs she conducts. So as always, you are in good hands. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here today because of all the things I train on, presentation skills is my passion, as Lauren said. The reason being, there's such a large amount of the general population who do not like to have to stand in front of a room of people and speak. And I want for you to understand today, there is a way to overcome your anxiety. There are skills, just like riding a bike, that you can learn to help you look more polished and professional and feel at ease. There's no reason that you have to go through these intimidating situations with a lot of anxiety. So I'm going to share my screen. Today, we're going to be talking about presenting with precision and poise. Please, I want this to be interactive. If you would, put questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask you to answer things in the chat panel. I want to tailor this to meet your specific needs. So I have a whole presentation, but if you're not hearing something that you have a question on, I'd like you to investigate that and show us and ask about that. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. My first question for you in chat, when you have to do something a little bit more formal, maybe you have a pitch, maybe you have a presentation to a small group of possible investors, or perhaps some new clients or new prospects, what do you struggle with the most if you have to speak publicly and share information? Is it that you worry that you don't have that executive presence? Do you worry that I'm not sure who's going to be in the room and how I need to react to that? Sometimes we're uncomfortable with what we've put together as our topic, or we think, are they even paying attention to me? You see 6 different examples here, and I'd like you just to drop into chat. What happens to you if you just are not feeling it? You just don't feel prepared. So just a quick note in chat, you'll see it at the bottom of the bar. You click on that little down arrow, it'll open up the panel, and tell me what concerns you or worries you if you don't just feel super prepared for a presentation. I know a lot of times people are concerned because if you don't know who's in the audience, you don't know their personality types necessarily, and different personality types react differently to content. Stress in general, yeah. Unfamiliar with the audience, you've lost the audience. That's a horrifying feeling. You question the confidence you have with your material. Too much in too little time. I have some fabulous tools I'm going to show you later that can help you manage how much content you put together in order to have that right amount of content for the time. Questions that might fool you. Yeah, you can do a whole wonderful presentation, and if you mismanage the Q&A, then it kind of, takes away from all the power that you just exhibited. My heart starts beating fast and my voice cracks. So common. Everything you all just commented on are just things that happen all the time. I'm just nervous in general. Yeah. I'm here to tell you, these are learned techniques, just like anything else. Like I said, literally like riding a bike. Once I kind of cover all of these, you'll feel like, it's not really that hard. But you have to be introduced to this information kind of in chunks. Like I'm going to tell you to talk to people in the eye and stand still. I mean, that's not that shocking, but you need to kind of have that presented in a way that you say, I got you now. I know how that important that is. And the time presentations are stressful. Absolutely. All right, let's move on. So today I'm going to cover a number of things. The first thing I'm going to talk about, and I think it's really important, is how to manage stress before you even get into the meeting. Then I'm going to talk about physical skills that we can use to look calm, confident, and poised. I'm going to have you work on a little elevator pitch. And if you're not familiar with the elevator pitch, we'll get more into that later. I'm going to tell you some content tips when you're putting together a slide. And I'm going to kind of workshop one particular slide to show you what you don't want to do and what works much better. Then I'm going to give you some tips on managing a Q&A, because like someone said, you don't want to get fooled by a question. You don't want to get off topic. There's a lot of things that can go haywire. I am going to take questions throughout the presentation. Lauren has kindly agreed to manage the Q&A panel. So the Q&A panel is separate from the chat panel, which you have open now. If you look down on your toolbar, you'll see Q&A. If you have questions as I'm going, please pop them in. Or if you want to wait till I'm finished and maybe talk about a specific scenario that I haven't covered, we can certainly do that at the end as well. My goal for you is to be able to manage your anxiety by being aware that it's happening. I want you to create this dynamic and confident presence by knowing what kind of body language you should exhibit. And I want you to be able to have a clear and compelling message if you're using slides or if you're just speaking from perhaps a one-page Word doc.
I saw a thing, actually, a study that said speaking in front of a crowd is considered the #1 fear of the average person. I found that amazing. #2 was death. Death was #2? This means to the average person, if you have to be at a funeral, you would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
I just love that because it's so true. It doesn't have to feel that bad. I have a big word to throw at you, glossophobia. Basically, it's the fear of public speaking, and about 75% of the population fears public speaking. Now, of course, there's a variety of levels of fear. Some people are a little bit nervous. Some people actually physically get sick before they have to present. I have had HR managers, when I conduct workshops, tell me that they have people that are super sharp at their positions and they've really proven themselves, but they don't have this skill set. And the HR managers are worried that people won't be able to handle a meeting, to control the conversation, because they don't have that executive presence. I applaud all of you today because the last statistic is only about 8% of people who do get nervous presenting try to do anything to change it. Even logging on to this webinar and spending a few minutes with me, I'm going to give you some tips that are really going to change the way you look at things and the way that you put your content together. I'm going to have Freddie open a poll. So he will open a poll and there's some questions in there. Somebody already mentioned that they get sweaty. What happens to you when you were nervous? And you can check all the boxes that apply. What physical things manifest in your body, like sweating, when you're getting nervous? And we'll leave this open for about 30 seconds. Take your time. You do have to hit submit after you've made your choices, then when we have a lot of responses, Freddie will reopen the poll to see what the results are. What do you struggle with the most in terms of your body's reaction to stress? There might be some that aren't even on the list too. These are the most popular ones. How do we look, Freddie? Are we getting some answers?
Yeah, it looks like rapid heartbeat, lose my train of thought are number 1 and 2.
Okay, not surprising. We'll give you about 15 more seconds to answer that poll. Click any that apply. And then in a few seconds, Freddie's going to close the poll and share the results with all of us. Well, it looks like the winner is lose my train of thought. I have the easiest technique for you to not have that happen. You're not even going to believe it. And then the second most popular one is rapid heartbeat. I got great news about that one. You feel like your heart is jumping out of your chest. Guess what? Audience doesn't see it. You feel like we can see your heart, but we can't. Knowing that the audience can't see how your anxiety is manifesting can just take a big weight off your shoulders already, because you go, oh, I feel like the people see it, but now I know they don't. And what was number 3? Number 3 looks like it was talk too fast. Yeah, I'll have some tips about that too. So thank you so much for that feedback. Those are things that, like I said, I have been teaching presentation skills for almost 14 years. These are common, these are typical. And really, frankly, the only thing the audience really can pick up on in terms of anxiety is if you have the neck that kind of gets red sometimes, or if you blush. That's a little harder to hide, but most of the things, shaky knees, we don't usually see those. So all those things that happen, you can take off your plate and stop worrying about them. All right, why is breathing crucial? Having good breath, good amount. I mean, this is something you might not think about. Well, I worry about a lot of things. I don't think about my breath, but if you're not breathing correctly, it can do a lot of things that are harmful. Drop some notes in chat. Why do you think it's really important that we have good diaphragmatic breathing, meaning coming from down in your diaphragm, which is below your rib cage, and getting those nice deep breaths? Tell me why you think that could be important. Calms you down, says Richanda. Absolutely. Anything else? Anybody else have any ideas? Why is it so important to have that nice breathing? To stay more calm, voice is supported. Spot on. Helps you project. Yeah, all those things are absolutely true. So when we think of breathing, our brain uses 20% of our body's oxygen. If we do not have enough oxygen, things are going to happen. We can feel foggy, unfocused, we can feel edgy, and that's all based on not getting a breath. And as I mentioned, some of you probably don't even think about that one. How do we manage that? If any of you go to yoga, you know that there's a lot of deep breathing exercises. And most of us know that if we're really wound up and we're trying to settle down, deep breathing can really just make us feel better. There's a specific technique that I love, because imagine that you're in a meeting and you're going to present in 10 minutes and you're starting to feel that anxiety and you've got to figure out a way to calm down. What you're going to do is you're going to sit quietly at your seat. Nobody knows you're doing this. And you're going to do something called 4 square breathing. What you do is you inhale to the count of 4. You hold your breath for 4 counts. You exhale to the count of 4, and you hold your breath for 4 counts. I think the trick is when you're holding your breath for 4 counts, then when you exhale for 4 counts, you're really kind of pushing all that breath out. It lowers your heart rate. It increases your oxygen supply, which we just heard. If we don't have oxygen, things are going to go sideways, and it decreases the stress in your body. What I would like to do is just practice this together. Wherever you are, I like you just to close your eyes, and I'm going to count through 2 rounds of this deep breathing exercise. All right, is everybody ready? I want you to inhale to the count of 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm hoping that you all felt a little bit of that pressure come off you just by doing that simple little exercise. Another concept I want to cover with you is called fixed mindset versus growth mindset. You might be familiar with this study or this terminology, but there was a book written by Carol Dweck called Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. What Carol Dweck did, she looked at how people perceive their ability to make a change in their life. She found people that felt that, you know what, this is just how I am. I'm always going to be like this. I can't make a change. That's a fixed mindset. So imagine you view yourself as, I'm rather introverted. I could never do what Stephanie does and speak in front of a bunch of people. That is just not me. I am never going to be good at that. That's a fixed mindset. If you have a growth mindset, that means I can get some education, I can do some practice, I can do things to increase my comfort and increase my knowledge around a topic, and I can get better. I would like you all to think about having that growth mindset. I have seen people take leaps and bounds from a morning to at the end of a day, just practicing some of these skills. Don't think that, I'm too introverted, I can't do this. You can do it. If you would like to kind of take a screen capture or take a picture, here's the book, Carol Dweck, PhD, Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. The bottom line, great speakers are made, not born. Okay, I lost my thing. There it is. We all have ways to try to reduce some of this anxiety. Basically what it is, it's adrenaline. There's adrenaline running through our body when we get anxious. When you're presenting, I would ideally like you to keep a little bit of that because I want you to be engaging and authentic, and I want you to make a connection with the audience. So I do want some level of activity, I guess is a word for it. We all do things. We all have techniques that we use ourselves when we're feeling anxious. So what I'd like you to do is just pop into chat. What do you do personally if you feel that, boy, I'm feeling nervous and I almost have, it's almost time for me to talk to this group. What do you do to manage that? You take time to pause. Rachanda, that's awesome. That's awesome. What else? I know you guys all have techniques. We all do. Whoops, went too fast. Anything else? Anything else that you do on your own to manage this? Positive self-talk. I love that. I'm still learning, but self-motivation. Those are all great. Those are all great. Let's talk about other things that we can do. Here's my question for you. What about caffeine? Imagine you have a meeting or a presentation at, say, 9 in the morning. You usually have a couple of cups of coffee, a couple of Cokes, whatever it is. You usually use a little bit of caffeine every morning. Do you do that if you're already feeling a little tension around the presentation, how do you handle using caffeine if you're already feeling a little anxious? Drop a note in chat. I am sorry. I have caffeine once a day, someone says. James says, don't mess with the coffee. Anybody else have another opinion? I accidentally advanced my bullet too quickly. Believe it or not, use it as you normally would. James, think about it. If you're a coffee drinker and you skip your coffee that morning, we all know how we feel. We feel off. We might have a headache. So you don't want to interrupt what you do normally. You don't want to drink more. And if you are not a caffeine user, I would not suggest that this is the day to try it, in order to get some kind of energy. Caffeine is okay as long as you use it in the same amount that you do every day. I thought that was kind of interesting. I love this. This is called anxiety reappraisal. This was done at Harvard Business School. The professor looked at two groups of people that were getting ready to present. And they were all nervous. The one group was told to repeat kind of like a mantra to themselves, I am calm, I am calm, I am calm. The other group was told to say, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. I'm going to have Freddie open another poll. And I want you to answer, which group do you think did better? Was it the people that told themselves they were calm? Was it the people that told themselves, I'm excited? Or did they kind of do about the same? So click on the radio button of the answer that you think is most likely to be true. And then after a few minutes or so, we'll have Freddie release the results. Who do you think did better? Or did they do the same? Just by saying something to themselves, that self-motivation. All right, so we have 7 that think it's when you say I'm excited. We have 6 that thought they probably did about the same. And 5 of you thought it's when you tell yourself you're calm. I'm probably not going to unmute because we have a lot of people on the line. Instead, I'd like you to put into chat why you chose your answer before I tell you what the answer is. Why do you think it was the people who told themselves they were calm, or the people that told themselves they're excited? Or why do you think they did the same? Comment in chat so we can kind of assess how we all came to our conclusions. James says he tried it. It works. James, which one did you say? Did you say excited or calm? Calm. Oh, okay. Marilyn says truthful of the situation. Okay. If you tell yourself positive outcomes, excited, those things happen. Okay. That's Robert. Anybody else? The same, because your feelings about a thing determines your outcome. So if you say you're calm or you're excited, you're thinking a positive thought either way, and that determines the outcome. That's not a bad assumption. Believe it or not, the people who told themselves they were excited actually did the best. How in the world is that true? Because think of it this way. If you're nervous, your heart might be beating quickly, you might be speaking quickly, your palms are sweaty. Those physical manifestations of anxiety are very, very similar to physical manifestations of excitement. Imagine you're jumping on a plane tomorrow and you're flying to Paris. Your hands might be sweaty. Your arms might be sweaty, your heart might be beating, but for a completely different reason. It's positive excitement. You can kind of trick your brain into thinking all those physical symptoms are really more about excitement than fear. When you try to tell yourself you're calm, although that's worked for James, apparently, your body, there's kind of a disconnect, because when you're calm, your heartbeat is lower and you feel more relaxed. So generally speaking, it's actually the I'm excited, because those symptoms kind of match. Yeah. But I'm glad the calming works for James too. And as I mentioned earlier, this is so critically important. When I'm conducting a workshop, I'll have people come up and they'll do a little presentation, and then I'll come up to the front of the room and get some feedback. And I'll ask them, especially the very first time they're up in front, I'll say, how do you feel? And about half the time people will say, oh, I was so nervous. I think I did terrible. And then I turn to the room and I say, what did you guys see? And they're like, oh, I didn't see that. I couldn't tell. The takeaway is, like I said, unless you have the blotchy neck, then you're going to do something like this or turtleneck. Unless you have the blotchy neck, 9 times out of 10, the audience does not see it, and you can just set it aside and take that baggage off your shoulders. All right, I'm going to stop. Lauren, do we have any questions? Or if you have questions right now on anything we've talked about, you want to just drop them in Q&A, and then Lauren can share them with me. Anything that you're confused about, or, James probably is surprised that the calming worked for him and it doesn't for most people, but anybody have anything that they want to ask me? Going to put that in the Q&A instead of the chat panel. Oh, in the meantime, I love Robert put a quote in here. The greatest limits in life are self-imposed. We're our own worst enemy, aren't we? Okay, Melinda.
Stephanie?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to read what you were about to.
Okay, Melinda's asking, how do you handle questions that you may not be prepared for? Melinda, if you can hang on, I'm going to cover some Q&A later. But you know what? I'll just tell you this one. Here's the thing. One of the misperceptions about presenting in a Q&A is we think we have to have all the answers. Nobody anywhere has all the answers. If you do not, there's 2 things you can do. You can just admit it and say, you know what? I'm sorry, I don't have that information. My colleague worked on something similar. Let me check with them, and I will get back to you tomorrow by noon. The takeaway here is get the answer to the question. Don't just say, I don't know, and then circle back with that person. Take their contact information down. There is no shame in not knowing an answer. Another thing you can do is, if there's a subject matter expert in the room, somebody that knows 12 times as much about a topic as you do, you could say, Jim, you know what? I know you worked on this. Do you have any input? You can see if somebody can bail you out. But the bottom line is, if you don't know the answer, you simply say so, and then you follow up later. All right. Thanks, Melinda. We'll get a little bit more into that in a while. So at the end of the day, before you even get into the meeting, you're going to do all of these things. You're going to have that 4 square breathing to lower your adrenaline and your cortisol and increase your oxygen. You're going to go in there with that growth mindset of, I know I can do this, and I've practiced and I'm prepared and I'm going to do a great job. You're going to manage your caffeine, only use it like you would any other day. And you're going to reappraise your anxiety as excitement instead of fear. Which one of these do you think might help you? Which one did you go, oh, I love that, I'm going to do that? So pop into chat, which of those 4 activities do you think are going to help you the most? Four square breathing. I love it. Nervous versus excited. Yeah. Growth mindset, breathing. Breathing. No calmness for me. Excited. Breathing. Oh, the breathing does so much for you. Okay, good. I'm glad you're taking some things away. In any type of training you take, of all the things that you hear, you usually take literally 1 to 3 takeaways that you go, oh, love that. All the things I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, you probably won't remember, but I want you to write down the things that really resonate with you that you think, I think that's going to make a big, big difference. All right. Thank you for that. Now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about professional presence. And professional presence is created by the way we use our bodies. So let's break that down. There's basically 5 physical skills I'm going to discuss. Eye contact, breathing and pace. We've already touched on the breathing a bit. Open hands, movement and stance, and voice inflection. All right. Why do we need eye contact? A lot of people are uncomfortable, or some of you, and I'm horrified to hear this. I had a class a couple of weeks ago of new hires straight out of college. So they should be getting the most contemporary presentation skills training, you would think, right? They are still being taught, and maybe you were taught this, that you don't look at individuals, that you kind of scan the room and look at everybody really quickly. That does nothing for your brain. If you're scanning, you're really not making a human connection. We need to, even in an everyday conversation, we need to give eye contact 60 to 70% of the time in order for people to feel like they've made that connection with us. And we think eye contact indicates confidence, interest, enthusiasm. So tell me, if you meet with somebody, if they're presenting or you're just having a chat with them, and they don't share much eye contact, what does that indicate to you? How do you perceive that? So drop a note in chat. If somebody really kind of avoids good, strong eye contact, what do you think? What do you think that means? Not interested, lack of confidence or unsure. They're not listening. Yeah. Evasive, lacks credibility, shy, insecure, not interested, uncomfortable. Is that how you want to project? And I know you don't. And I know also culturally, different audiences don't have as strong of eye contact as, say, an American audience does. But what I would suggest to you, if you come from a culture where strong eye contact can be considered a little bit aggressive, in the US, it's not considered that way. It's considered, as people were saying, that you're confident and you know what you're talking about and you're interested. Look at that. We think people aren't interested, they're not listening. And it really just might be, I'm a shy person and I have a hard time with this. So we really want to work on looking at people in the eye. Why? Or how, rather. The first thing I want you to think about is, let's say you're in a room and there's 10 people. You can easily literally talk to all 10 of them, meaning kind of chat with each person at a time. What I'd like you to do is find one person, start with one person, deliver a complete sentence or a complete thought. That generally is about 3 to 5 seconds. That's not that long. For those of you who are not used to holding eye contact for a while, that might think, oh, I don't want to freak people out. I don't want them to think I'm staring at them. First of all, if you forget and you kind of get stuck with somebody, they're going to disconnect from you. If you really truly are staying with somebody too long and looking at them specifically too long, they'll just look away because they'll be uncomfortable. However, most people appreciate the eye contact. They feel like you're interested in them individually, and they feel like, you care about them and you really want to share the information. Now, there is a group of people who just as an audience member aren't comfortable. They don't really want you to share that strong eye contact. In that case, you would just move on to the next person. But when you're talking to one person at a time, a miraculous thing happens. You forget about everybody else. Because most of us, when we talk with people one-on-one, piece of cake, right? It's not scary to have a one-on-one. That's what you're doing in a room when you have eye contact for a complete thought. You're having a chat with Jim. Then you move over here and you're having a chat with Jenny. You're breaking the room up into individuals. So they're conversations. And then you don't have to have that, everyone's looking at me and it's making me really nervous. You break them up into individuals. Whew, immediately you feel better. And like I said, look at as many people as you can. I know sometimes people might have a meeting and they say, oh, I always talk to my two colleagues because they're friendly. But then you talk to two people. What happens if you only talk to two people? Everybody else is going to ignore you because you're not including them. They're going to get their phone out. They're going to be checking Facebook or Instagram. You need to share that eye contact with everybody. And that scanning the room does absolutely nothing. So I don't care if that's what your professors told you, nonsense. Another thing about eye contact is it settles your brains. Sometimes when I see people practicing, they'll be kind of looking at the ceiling, or sometimes we look at the carpet like there's some kind of information in the carpet, but we're looking all around the room and we're trying to collect our thoughts. If our eyes are not focused, our brain doesn't work as well. Our brain isn't focused. So when you look at that one person at a time, it also helps your brain to settle down and you're less likely to lose your train of thought. If you lose your train of thought frequently, I bet you dollars to donuts, it's because your eye contact is too quick or non-existent. You need to have that connection to settle your brain. And as I said, people enjoy it generally because when I do an exercise, people say, oh, no, that was good. I felt included. Most people feel recognized when you hold your eye contact longer. And it's just going to help relax you. And I know I can hear you right now. Those of you who don't like eye contact, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's the best thing you can do for yourself when you're nervous. All right, let's talk about breathing and our pace. If we talk too fast, we'll lose the audience. What happens is sometimes people just talk fast in general. I'm a notoriously fast talker, so I have to be very deliberate when I'm doing some training or facilitation, because if I deliver the message too quickly, you are not going to get it. Another thing people can do, in addition to talking fast, is they can have what are called run-on sentences. It would be something like this. My name's Stephanie Markovic, and I'm here to talk about presentation skills. So let's go ahead and get started. And I hope you get a lot of out of this session today. So let's talk about some things that we can do to calm down. All those sentences were all connected into one giant sentence. The problem is we can't pick out key points if you have a run-on sentence. If we talk too slow, it can just be boring. And if we're not breathing, we talked about this earlier, it can make your voice quiver. It can bring your pitch up. Your voice is an unnatural pitch, and you're not projecting in the way you want to. So let's talk about how we control all of those things. Besides eye contact, pausing is my favorite thing for you to learn. Pausing and thinking and taking a breath is so liberating. If you look at the second point, it helps you prevent connector words and non-words. What does that mean? Type into chat if you've heard the phrase connector words or non-words. What do I mean by that? What are connector words or non-words? Give me some examples. You might not know them by their name, but you're going to understand once I explain them. Not heard before, new to me. Like a non-word is when we fill the space as we're thinking. Instead of having the pause and being silent for a second, we go, you've heard those a million times. Connector words are and so, which are just connecting all those words to make up run-on sentences. I know so many of us. I'll tell you what, as a matter of fact, go down to your panel and click on what are the reactions, I believe. And do we have reactions? Freddie, can they raise their hand?
They can raise their hand. Yeah, there's a raise hand feature.
Okay. So if you want to go to your panel and go to reactions, raise your hand if you think you go, You might be aware of it. You might not be aware of it. You might be working on it. You might have gotten feedback. I guarantee you a lot of you do, because it's just a super common thing. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I got a couple of you admitting to it. Why do we do that? Why do we insert the or the Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody uses them. And if you have one or two, nobody notices. But literally, I've been places where the speaker is saying those words so many times that somebody in the audience is marking, making tick marks. He said it 16 times in 2 minutes. When you overuse them, people completely disconnect from your message and they're only listening to the ums. Oh, there's another one. Why do we use them when we know they're unattractive? Okay, let's see what kind of comments we have. Anybody know? What do you think the theory is behind that? Because they're so common. Why do we think that's appropriate? I mean, we don't think about it. It's not something we plan, but why do they happen? What's the subconscious thinking behind that? Thinking pauses. Ralph, it is a thinking pause. It's appropriate. It's appropriate to pause, to think about what you want to say next, or maybe if your breathing isn't great, to take another deep breath. Yeah, Marilyn says, we make noise instead of pausing silently. It's crazy. I think we're afraid to be silent while we're thinking because we think it's going to make us look like we don't know what we're talking about, or we lost our place. Sometimes in meetings, we feel like if I stop, someone's going to jump in and take over. And that actually could be true. And it's a sign of nervousness. But what you want to do instead is, instead of inserting the as you're thinking, you're going to pause. You're going to be silent. And you're going to give yourself a moment to think. That sounds scary to think, I'm going to stand there and I'm not going to say anything. It literally lasts 1 or 2 seconds. It's enough for you to collect your thought, get on track, and guess what? It doesn't look bad to the audience. It makes you look poised. Like you have all the time in the world. You're in control. And once you do it, it's so liberating because you're like, all along, I've been trying to, talk and think, and it's too much. You can't think if you're still talking. It really adds a lot of power. And then when we're pausing, we have that moment to take those deep breaths. And we said the pitch could be unnatural. That point gives audiences time to think and process. This is a gift for your audience. Think about it. Whatever you're there to discuss, if you're there to discuss your business and your growth plan with some investors, or you're trying to pitch to a prospect, you are presenting new information 9 times out of 10. You need the audience to have a moment to go, oh, okay, I get it. You need to let them process and digest what you've said. You might be pausing because you have the tendency to say, or you're running out of breath. But even if you're doing it for selfish reasons, it's a gift to the audience because they can stop and understand clearly what you're telling them. If you don't pause, if you just keep talking and insert a bunch of non-words or have run-on sentences, your audience isn't going to get your message. And then you've just kind of wasted everybody's time. All right. There really is a tremendous authority in silence. You've seen people use it. Like maybe you have amazing statistics, and you're pitching investors and you say, I've grown my business in the last 12 months and increased my revenues by 146%. And then you just pause. And that says to the audience, this was an important point because she was quiet and she emphasized it. So you can use the pause in a number of ways, but it's just a fabulous tool once you get used to it. Any questions? Do we have any questions, Lauren, or does anybody have one that they've thought of? Making sense so far? Okay, anytime you want to ask me something, just pop it into chat. Hands. This is something that people struggle with so much. There is this fallacy that you should not use gestures. You should keep your hands together. You shouldn't gesture wildly. You're going to look like a windmill. There's all this misinformation about gestures and using your hands. Nonsense. You want to use your hands. There's a study that said people that use their gestures increase the value of their spoken message by 60% because you're using them to kind of create, like to double down on what you're saying. You're re-emphasizing points by using your gestures as well. And there's data that shows people that do TED Talks and use twice as many gestures as people that don't are more highly rated. I'm here to tell you that they're a good thing and they're not something you should avoid. I'm not going to unmute the phone, but how many of you don't use gestures that maybe you have like a resting position here? Or I always can tell when folks are in ex-military, they put their hands behind the back. Raise your hands if you're not really very comfortable and you kind of tie up your gestures. Raise your hand if you feel like, yeah, I never know what to do with them, so I just lock them. Anybody? Ooh, I'm liking that nobody said yes so far. All right, awesome. First thing you can do is you can create a visual. The widgets that we had in the past were kind of a rectangle, and the new ones are going to be circular. That kind of re-emphasizes your point. And like, the first thing we need to do is get the software implemented. The second thing we need to do is do a beta with one department. It just re-emphasizes your key points. Now, here's the weird thing. What do you do when you start to talk? Because, we're not moving our hands around until we start to talk. You're going to just drop your hands at your side. And it's going to feel really, really weird because you feel like a soldier. But your hands will move on their own as soon as you start to talk. There are some programs that actually basically script hand gestures. So if you're standing near your slide, like you point at a bullet and you come back here, then you point at a bullet and come back here. I don't believe in that. I believe using your hands as naturally and authentically as possible. You don't have to do anything artificial. The most important feature, eye contact's great, pausing is great, but what you want to always try to achieve when you're presenting or conducting a meeting is being authentic and letting the audience see who you are. That's when people connect. People do business with people they like, right? So you want your personality to come out. I don't want you to all be robots and think I have to be serious and I'm trying to get funding. You want to be yourself. That's when you're going to make the connection with a room. Also, your gestures, believe it or not, can help you relax, which sounds like, how's that possible? You may still have some nervous energy, even though you did some 4-square breathing before you started. But if you have some nervous energy, it can be released with your gestures that you're using. So it's another way to kind of reduce that adrenaline. And it just adds some visual variety to the presentation. Same thing goes for your stance. I don't want you to be so rigid and tense that you look like a robot, but more frequently what I see is people that are too casual. Gentlemen, you want to stick your hands in your pocket and you'll say to me, oh, I like to look relaxed. There are situations that's absolutely appropriate. But if you're trying to get a new customer or you're trying to get funding, this is not the time to look relaxed. This is the time to look serious and credible. So how do we do that? We stand with our feet shoulder width apart, just probably a little bit further apart than you would normally stand. You keep the weight even on both feet. A lot of times we don't realize it, but we're rocking or we're leaning on one leg. We don't even know what we don't know about our stance, but a nice solid stance is what we're aiming for. And position towards the audience, that just means if you're looking over here, bring your whole body with you. You don't want to just look over that side. Turn your whole body so you can kind of speak directly to people. Use your space. If you happen to be using slides, I see a lot of people who will be in front of the room by the screen or the TV, depending on how it's projected, and they stand right beside that. And I'll ask them, why do you stand there? And they'll say, I want everyone to be able to see my slides. That could be partially true, but what is probably happening is you want them to look at your slides because you don't want them to look at you because you're intimidated. Use the space. Walk around the room. Walk around the front of the room. Don't just waltz around because everybody can't hear you, but use the space to be able to engage with multiple groups of people. You look credible, you look more engaged. It's just a better look. Now, you don't always stand and present. You might be having a meeting around a conference room table, but what you're going to do, not when you're just, listening to somebody else, when you're presenting, you're literally going to just sit a little bit forward on your chair. The reason you do that is because you look more engaged, but because I want you to put your feet on the floor. If you're in a chair like I have, and you don't put your feet in the floor, and you have a swivel chair, then before you know it, you're doing something like this. You have no idea. It just gives that extra, look of distraction. So you're going to sit forward, keep your hands up here, and you still can gesture, but you want to be a little more forward, not this. Who's going to want to give you money if you're doing this? It's not a serious look. How about our voice? Some people naturally are quieter speakers. If you're too soft, it sends a bad message, though. It makes you sound meek. It makes you sound like you're not confident, and people might not take you seriously. And the other problem is they literally might not be able to hear you. If they can't hear you, they're going to disconnect. Some of us just naturally are a little bit louder. And you have to be careful with that because that can kind of come across as aggressive or too assertive. You want to have that volume that's appropriate. How do we figure out what that is? Basically, you want to project your voice to the person furthest away from you in the room. That's about the right volume. And what I would say, if you have colleagues or coworkers and you're not sure about this, because you kind of almost need some feedback on this one, is ask them, how do I sound in a meeting? Am I loud enough? Am I too quiet? Am I too loud? Maybe get some feedback from somebody who's been with you. Speak naturally. Okay, this is kind of connected to content, but I'm going to talk about it right now. When you're delivering information, let's say it's a PowerPoint deck, you might write out a script for every slide so you know exactly what you want to say. And then you memorize all of it. You think, great idea. I have all my content memorized. I know exactly what I'm going to say. Bad idea. 2 reasons. The first reason, when you memorize it, you sound like you memorized it. Hello, I'm Stephanie Markovic. I'm here to talk about presentation skills. I want you to get something good out of the program. I can tell when people do it, and they do it for good reason because they want to be comfortable and confident, but it ends up sounding unnatural. And the bigger problem is somebody stops you, asks you a question, you just got disrupted in the middle of your script. And it's really, really, really hard to find your way back to where you were. Use your normal tone of voice. That's back to the authenticity that I want you to think about. Smiling. That seems so simple, but when you smile, you're pushing positive energy out to the audience, and generally they will push it back. If you look, worried or angry, then the room is going to be like, what's up with that person? So just a simple smile can really help everybody feel more relaxed. Don't tail off at the end of the sentence. Sometimes you're thinking about your next slide and you're so excited that you drop your volume at the end of the sentence. So you might say something like, the Cleveland Browns played against Pittsburgh and they lost at the end of the 4th quarter. Like you drift off. Keep the volume up the whole time. Another thing you might be familiar with is something called up talk. Up talk means you raise your pitch at the end of a sentence instead of dropping the pitch. So what comes out of that is it sounds like you're asking a question. I'm here to talk about presentation skills. I'm confident you're going to get a lot out of today. You're confident I'm going to get a lot out of today, because you sound like you're asking a question instead of making a statement. So make sure your voice drops at the end of a statement. Yeah, and it's about, if you're too soft, nobody can hear you. The vocal variety, when you get excited about something, that excites the audience. So use your voice to support that. And it just adds presence. All right, now we're going to do a little knowledge check. See how you're doing, if you're eating your lunch or if you're paying attention. What I would like you to do is just number a piece of paper from 1 to 6. And then each of these statements, there's going to be a true or false answer. So just number your paper from 1 to 6 and answer how you think, that you should answer for the correct answer. You should hold eye contact for about 5 to 7 seconds per person. True or false? You should hold eye contact for 5 to 7 seconds per person. Number 2, putting your hands in your pocket is okay to look more approachable. Putting your hands in your pocket is okay to look more approachable. Number 3, you should stand with weight even on both feet. Number 4, breathing deeply increases your oxygen. Number 5, most great presenters are born that way. And number 6, above all, let a little bit of your personality show. So I'll give you another 15 seconds if you have to go back and think about one of them again. True or false? Which of these are true and which of these are false? So it's false, false, true, true, false, true. 1, 2, and 5 are false. So let's take a peek at those again. 5 to 7 seconds, that's probably a little bit too long. So you want to hold the eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds. And I don't want you to get hung up on that number, because you can't possibly count to 5 and deliver a message just for a complete sentence. Putting your hands in your pocket. Nope, nope. Because usually women's pants don't often have pockets, but usually gentlemen's do. And then you start playing with your keys and, it's just not a good look. And number 5, most great presenters are born that way. Any good presenter has had training and years of practice. So far, I've primarily been discussing a more formal presentation, a more formal pitch meeting. But I want you to not just think of these skills as presentation skills. I'd like you to think about them as communication skills. When you're just having a one-on-one conversation or you're on a Zoom meeting, you want to think about all these physical skills and the non-words all the time. You carry, you're your brand, especially those of you who are entrepreneurs. You represent your brand. So you always want to have that polished and professional look. All right, so let's talk a little bit here. What can be some of the challenges with something a little bit more informal? If you have an elevator speech, an elevator pitch, sometimes you've memorized it and you just spit it out really quick. Again, if you're trying to promote yourself and you say that too quickly, there's no value. Sometimes we forget about eye contact if we're not, focusing on something formal. And we just don't project that confidence that we should. You're going to just use these same skills. You're going to pause and breathe to think about what you want to say next. You're going to talk to eyes, just like we've always talked about. You're going to prepare in advance. If you're just, prepare in advance is something a little bit more formal, but if you're doing something very important, You have to prepare and you have to practice. I know you don't want to think about that and, practicing or your presentation or your pitch. It sounds so boring. Or what people will do is they'll open their slide deck and they'll toggle through all the slides and you kind of think to yourself, I know what I'm going to say there. You need to literally say these things out loud, because that's when you hear if there's not a good flow or, you can't articulate a point. It's probably because your points that you're speaking from aren't written correctly. So you need to practice aloud. So let's see if we can maybe just do a quick little workshop on an elevator speech. If you're not familiar, it's just a technique that you already have prepared. Now, I know I told you I don't want you to memorize, but you want to have, the basic bones of the elevator speech prepared if you're going to a networking event, if you're going to a career fair, whatever you're doing, you have sometimes very limited time to introduce yourself, maybe introduce your company, what's, unique about you. And sometimes we don't think about that ahead of time. And then we stumble and we think, well, that didn't sound very good. This is something you should have prepared. So at a minute's notice, you can say something fairly articulate to get the message across. So here is what I'm looking for you to do. And, I don't want this to make you nervous. It's just a little practice here. A one-sentence introduction. It's going to be brief. You're going to do something to grab somebody's interest. So if you look at the example, hi, my name is Janine, and I help companies sell more products and stand out online. Tell me more. It's the, tell me more. And explain what you do. We've always been taught, what problem do you solve? Do you solve? What problem does your business address? I would say, I solve the problem of employees not presenting effectively at quarterly meetings and not meeting their goals, or something like that. I turn anxious presenters into confident, poised, clear messaging presenters. What's unique about you? Why hire me? There's a lot of people that sell presentation skills. Why do you love it? I told you earlier, of all the things I teach, all these things I facilitate, presentation skills is far and away my favorite. What I'm looking for is just to jot a few ideas down. I'm going to give you like 4 or 5 minutes. And then if I could have at least one brave individual to do a pitch for us, I want you to see if you can do it in 30 seconds. And then I can give you some feedback just on your tone of voice, your messaging. I'll open that slide back up so you can get some prompts here. This is just, a little outline. If there's something you want to add or delete, that's fine. You're trying to encapsulate your business in your value, in your ability to solve a problem in 30 seconds. So what time is it, Lauren?
It is 1:04.
Okay, so thank you. I'll give you to 1:08. Just jot some ideas down. Maybe you already have yours together and then you're good to go. But if you don't really have one, it's something you need to do, as I said, especially as a small business owner, so you can present yourself quickly. You never know. You might be at a barbecue and you meet somebody who might be a potential client. You need to have this ready in your hip pocket. So I'll give you to 1:08 to put something together. You have about 1 more minute to finish up. All right. I'm going to see if I have a brave soul out there. We will unmute your line and let you chat. So if you would raise your hand, if you would like to try to deliver your pitch in front of the group. The nice thing is we don't even see you. If you're willing to raise your hand. Oh, Ralph, I love it. Can we unmute Ralph, please?
Hello,
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Tell me what you do.
I do consulting for startups,
Oh, okay.
and what I wrote out about it after thinking about what you had to say is simply our consultants provide decades of experience for new and serial entrepreneurs.
Okay. How are you guys different? You've got tons of experience. That's awesome. But how are you guys different?
We're associated with several groups that also do the same kind of work, such as incubators, economic development agencies, and our connections with those groups are long-term. They're not something that came up yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that something that you think most of your, potential clients would find value in?
I think they do, particularly when it comes to finding anything in the government. And then it's surprising, new entrepreneurs are focused on their idea. They don't see a whole lot outside of their circle oftentimes. And so you're really able to help them with things that, took maybe 10 years to learn originally, and you could just give them the link right then and there. So yeah, you could be very helpful.
I love what you just said. You're saving them time because you're giving them access to tools to accelerate the growth of their business in a much shorter pace, period of time.
That's right.
I like that. I like that because okay, you have decades of experience. That's good. That's impressive. You're associated with some incubators and that sort of thing. But the value to that person is I can help you accelerate the growth of your business in a much shorter time than an entrepreneur typically experiences. And what does that lead to? What does that lead to? If you can help them accelerate the growth of their business quickly, what does that lead to for them?
More success and less mistakes.
This is going to end up resulting in more success, which we're anticipating, meaning more revenue and fewer mistakes, which reduce your expenses. I would just add those two because you've got the credibility, you've got the associations, but how is your company poised to make a difference in their life?
Thank you.
Makes it. You're welcome, Ralph. Thank you. Anybody else? I can do one more. Anybody else interested in doing a little review? Ralph's the only bold one today. That's okay. That's okay. I think the takeaway here is, experience is great. Connections are great. What is it that you can do to help people? Because we're selfish. We want to know what's in it for me. And I think by adding that, I can help you jump over those hurdles that it took me 20 years to jump over, which will accelerate the growth of your business. Who isn't going to respond to that? All right. That's awesome. Thanks, Ralph. All right. Let's talk a little bit about if we're actually going to put a deck together. I want to start with this point. In chat, I would like you to tell me I know this sounds like a weird question. What is the purpose of your slide deck? What is the purpose of your slide deck? Tell me what you think in chat. Oh gosh, I'm so glad. I didn't mean to show you guys the presenter view. No. Let me go back to the view that you're supposed to see. Thank you. Huh.
Stephanie, sometimes I just end show and
Okay.
then
Thank
restart.
you. Yeah. I'm sorry.
There it is.
Mistakes happen. Okay, so why do we have a deck? The best educate and communicate what you're pitching. Okay, that's good. What else? Raise VC funds for startup. That's right. Who's that? Robert. That's right, Robert. But I mean, what is the goal of using a deck? I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Let me just walk through what I'm saying. It might be a little bit clearer. The first point is your deck acts as your notes. Back in the day, you might have had a 3x5 note card and you looked at your card and you spoke to the audience. Now we have PowerPoint. The point here is the deck is for you. It is your note card. It has the prompts, brief prompts that you can quickly glance back and turn around and speak to, and then you're going to tell the story. It's not for your audience. What? That sounds crazy, but I would like you to kind of have a paradigm shift here. If your slides were the most valuable part of a presentation, you would create a deck, you would send it to a potential investor or a prospect, they'd look through your slides, they'd make a decision based on your slides, and they'd call you and say, it's a go. That's not what happens. You are there to present the information. You're the voice of the deck. The deck are notes for you. Now, I'm not saying there's not a time that you might want to step away if you're doing something in a classroom or a conference room to walk through perhaps a bar chart. But the nicest compliment you can get is, gosh, I hardly even looked at your slides. You were so engaging. The message comes from you. Those slides are for you to support you and be able to deliver that message. So how do we make sure it's easy? My job is to make presenting easy. Look at this slide. Believe me, this is the before slide. In chat, type in everything you can think of that's wrong with this slide. Because this is the bad one. This is the one we're going to fix. Oh, thank you, Sandra. What do we see on the slide that are not best practices? You can't read all that. Font is awful. Spacement, placement of image. way too text heavy and too small. Yep. Well, what else? Boo, that you should be a Steelers fan. What are we seeing here? We're seeing a number of things. The font is illegible. I know how it is. If you do a lot of presentations, you create a lot of decks, sometimes you think, oh, I want to do something different. This is not a good font. It's illegible. It's hard for you to read. It's hard for the audience to read. This is all in caps. We know from emails and texts, when people use all caps, they think we're yelling at them. There's complete sentences. Too many words for you. And when you have complete sentences, what's the audience going to do? They're going to ignore what you're saying. They're going to quickly read through that slide, and then they know what you're going to talk about. They don't have to listen to you because you've shared everything. I want you to hold your cards closer to the vest. And this graphic, the graphic's appropriate, but it's tiny. It's hiding the browns, the word the browns. This is just not good. So let's go step by step and see what we can do to clean this up a little bit. First of all, I cleared the font out and I changed it to sentence case. Already it's a big improvement. It's much more legible, much easier to see. But we still have complete sentences. And I think I have a visual still. I moved the visual too, so it's not laying over any other words. But look at the number of words. So we have complete sentences. The Cleveland Browns are 2 games into the season. You only need the amount of words that will prompt you to say what you want to say. So maybe you only need Browns are 2 games in. I had before Browns won their first game against the Bengals in Cleveland Browns Stadium. You don't need all those words. So let me show you how you would utilize these brief prompts to deliver a message, because these are just very brief. You're going to add the color. So let me talk a little bit about the current state of the Browns. Right now, we're 2 games into the season. The good news is we won our first game, which we haven't done in years and years, against Cincinnati here at home. Unfortunately, with our arch rivals, the Steelers, we lost our second game on the road in Pittsburgh. It happens every year. The crisis from that night is we lost our best running back, Nick Chubb, to a season-ending injury. In fact, it's the same injury he had at the University of Georgia as a student in 2015. It's just incredible. The next game that we have are with the Tennessee Titans this Sunday, September 24th at home. The words are brief and you're going to fill it in. And the beauty of this is you make the audience stay connected with you because, those are pretty clear, but sometimes your bullets are a hint of what you're going to talk about, but they need you to relay the whole message. And look what I did with the visual. Look how gorgeous that looks with the football in the background. One more thing I think we could do to even make this better. I bumped up the font and I double spaced. I feel like when you double space, see, that's kind of close. And if you're turning around to get your next bullet, all that information is kind of smushed and it's hard for your eye to quickly get your next point. So I'm going to double space and then I'm going to animate the bullets so they fly in one at a time. Why? 2 things. First of all, you're not showing your whole slide to the audience so they can't jump ahead and start thinking about something you're going to mention in a minute. Secondly, it's for you. When you turn to get your bullet or get your prompt, I'm going to read the last bullet. You're going to read the one that you've just flown in. So it's easier for you to kind of quickly focus and get that. So we bumped up the font size, we double spaced, and we just eliminated a ton of words. This is what you want a slide to look like. That's what we started with. If you want to do a screenshot of this or take a picture with your phone, these are just some best practices on how to create slides. A lot of you might know this. Some of this might be new to you. You don't want to have too many words in a bullet. You don't want complete sentences. You want sentence fragments. The one exception to that would be, let's say you have a mission statement or you're quoting Benjamin Franklin, then it is appropriate to have a complete sentence. Other than that, you want those sentence fragments. Don't go crazy. Don't use more than 2 font styles, and use one of the ones listed. They're clear, they're legible, they're professional. If you use a video, like I love that Seinfeld video. It's 15 seconds long. It gets the point across. It's funny, but you don't want it to be too long because it's not about watching a video. It's about getting that message across. And I would advise to download it. Don't rely on Wi-Fi because you don't know where you're going to be. So take a picture of that if you find some value in that. Just some basic steps. All right, I told you earlier a couple of things. Somebody said, sometimes I feel like they have too much time to speak or they don't have enough time. And part of that might be, you're given a lot of time, but part of it might be, did you create too much content that you're running out of time because you're trying to cover too much? Or did you not create enough content? I've told you, you might want to practice, and maybe you can just record yourself or set your timer on your phone. Yeah, that works. That's fine. But if you're on a laptop right now, you might want to just pop into PowerPoint quickly. One of the tools that so few people know about, and it's just this incredible tool, is called rehearse timing. You'll find it under slideshow. What you do is when your deck is finished and you want to practice, you're going to click on the rehearse timings button. What happens is you start, audibly repeating your message and, covering your message, and you do all your slides. At the end of your practice, you'll get a pop-up window that says, do you want to save your timings? And you say yes. Now what you can do is, let's imagine you wanted to create content for 15 minutes. You do this practice, you'll get a total at the end, and let's say you've spent 18 minutes. So you're like, a little long. Not only do you know how long it actually took you, if you put the slides into slide sorter view, which if you're not unfamiliar, it's down in the bar at the bottom of the slides. It's a bunch of little, looks like a tic-tac-toe board. And you click on that. Each slide that you covered will have the amount of time you spent on that slide. So if you have an outlier that you say, oh my gosh, I spent 4 minutes on slide 12. I can't spend that long on one slide. Then you can edit out some content, or maybe you just tighten up your messaging, but where you're, kind of getting into the weeds and where you need to not do that. It's a fabulous tool, but the most important part is when you're done practicing. Remember, I told you, you have to save your file so you can review the timings. Once you're done practicing, you have to go back up to that box that says use timings, uncheck it, and resave. If you forget to do that, when you go to present, your slides will advance independent of the clicker, and it will blow your mind, and you'll think that you're bumping the clicker because the slides are, the timings built in. So you have to clear out those timings so you control the time, the slides. That's a super cool one. Another, let's imagine you have trouble with intonation. Let's say you're a little monotone and you want to work on that. Or let's say that you have a tendency to use some of those non-words like and Another tool in slideshow is called rehearse with coach. You do the same thing, but at the end of that practice, you get a dashboard that tells you if you had a lot of non-words, if you're pausing enough, if you have vocal inflection. It's like having me there with you to tell you what you're doing well and what you need to work on. But it's the same thing. You have to uncheck that rehearse timings or rehearse with coach. So those are pretty cool. Did anybody know about those? Yeah, Melinda says, wow, love it. It's astounding. Yeah. Sometimes people know about the rehearse timings and they're like, yeah, I know it's there. I don't really use it. It's fabulous because it's pretty accurate. If anything, the only thing you have to be careful about is when you're practicing, you usually do speak a little more quickly. So just take that in consideration. One other thing, if you want to improve in some of these skills, I would record myself. If you could do it in maybe a less important setting for the first time, Record yourself and see what you're doing well. Here's the thing. It's intimidating to watch yourself on video. You're like, oh, I don't even want to see what I look like. Well, yes, you do. You want to see what you need to work on. But what I find with most people is you do a number of things well already. Maybe you already have good eye contact, but maybe you pace a little bit, or maybe you stick your hands in your pocket. It enables you to go, okay, that's good. That's good. That's what she told me to do. But that, I need to work on that. So video yourself. That's how you figure out what to work on. Now, quickly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about managing a Q&A. Just some tips to help you. As I said, maybe you take all your questions at the end. You get to the end of the presentation and somebody who's out for you, somebody that doesn't really like you, just starts firing at you. And you're like, what in the world is that? How can we manage some of that? First of all, look for next question. What in the world does that mean? If you find somebody that you know might want to challenge you, or they seem a little hostile, once you answer their question, start looking away and say, any other questions? What do we do? We say, did I answer your question? And we stay with that person. And if that person's adversarial, then they'll say, well, I have another question. And we're like, oh my gosh, I got to get away from this person. But it's hard to do. So you start by answering part of the question with that person, and then you share the answer with the rest of the room, and then you're looking somewhere else. In all likelihood, that adversarial person will shut down because you've moved on. If you have a lot of people to get to and you know there's a lot of questions, tell people you can only answer one. It's to avoid that, the conversation between the presenter and one person and nobody else gets their question answers. Take offline if not interested. What does that mean? When I was getting set up with Freddie and Lauren, they said sometimes people will ask generic questions about Jumpstart. If somebody were to ask me a question about Jumpstart, I'm not the authority, right? And I would say, you know what, let me connect you with Lauren. She'll be able to help you. Sometimes people ask things that don't relate to your topic, or not that they don't relate, but it's kind of in the weeds and the rest of the room isn't interested. You are free to say, hey, I can tell you're interested. Why don't you wait 5 minutes after the meeting, we'll chat. You don't need for the whole room to hear it. If it's out of scope, that's more what I said with Lauren. If they ask me something about the Jumpstart program in general, I don't know the answer to that. And I can decline to answer that because that's not what I'm here for. I'm not part of Jumpstart. I'm a contractor. If you're stuck and you're not sure, you can involve the audience. You can say, well, what do the rest of you think? How would you have handled that? Sometimes they can come to your rescue, or sometimes that's just a good way to get some ideas. So everybody, I always find that you learn so much from your peers that you need to share some of those best practices. And like I said earlier, I don't know. Let me look into that. I should be able to find an answer to you by end of the week. How about I send you an email by Friday? Follow through, though. Say you don't know. Don't forget to follow through. All right, Freddie, we have our last poll. This poll, again, you can select as many answers as you like. So they're around handling and managing a Q&A. Check any of them that you think are correct. Which ones do you think are true? Check all that you think apply. Give you about another 15 seconds. And Freddie will close the poll and share the results. All right, let's see what we found out, Freddie. Yeah, you got 100% on the first one. You can choose to limit the questions. Now, caveat, you're meeting with an investor and the person in charge asks you a lot of questions. Of course, you're going to answer all their questions. This is more about managing a room. You don't only have so much time. You don't want to get stuck with one person. These techniques are for kind of specific instances. If somebody that wants to give you money wants to ask you 1,000 questions, you're going to answer 1,000 questions. Yeah, you don't have to take as many because you might not ever leave the room if you take every single question. And multiple questions, the caveat of if it's a decision maker, yes. Other than that, you'll get stuck and then other people get frustrated. The subject matter expert, I love that idea. The only thing I would say with that, if you have something, a topic that you're just, you're getting your hands around and you don't have as deep a knowledge as maybe a subject matter expert that you work with, I would try to give them a heads up before the meeting and say, hey, Bob, you've been doing this forever. If I can't answer a question, would you mind if I throw it to you? It's always better to kind of give them a heads up. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. That is really all I have for you today. In summary, think about those things that you can do to limit your anxiety prior to a meeting. Focus on those physical skills and find maybe one. If you video record yourself and you see, I don't have very good eye contact, work on that for a while. Don't worry about all of them, because if you try to worry about all of them, it's overwhelming. Think about those slides that are clear, compelling, simple. Make sure you have an elevator speech in your hip pocket. And you can put some parameters around how you manage a Q&A session. What other questions do you have, or a scenario that I didn't cover that I might be able to help you with? I'm going to put open Q&A again. And if you have a question, let's chat about that. Anything else? Nothing? Here's another tip. When you ask the audience if they have questions, give them time. Because sometimes you might just say, I'd rather not have a bunch of questions. You'll say, oh, okay, thanks, no questions. People need a minute to think about, all right, should I ask her about that? Is that a stupid question? Give them time to develop their question. Don't shut down too quickly. Is it different when it's a panel of judges? Melinda, can you tell me what you mean? The Q&A or the presentation? Tell me what you mean by that if you have a panel of judges. Q&A. I think a Q&A session with a panel of judges would be back to answer any and all questions they ask you. First of all, I'm guessing there's no more than 3 to 5. They're evaluating you, and they're maybe going to give you funding, or you're going to win a competition of some sort. I would say in that situation, yes, answer all the questions that they ask. Again, it's more for time management when there's a lot of people, so you get around to answer questions and to manage possibly hostile people. A small group of judges who need information from you to make a decision, answer all the questions they have. Anybody else? Sometimes when I speak, I bomb, and at other times, I'm surprised how interested. I have not been able to judge previous to the end of the speech. Okay, Deborah, what do you mean that sometimes you do well and other times you do really well and you can't tell how you're doing until you're finished? Is that what you're saying? First of all, my first question is, do you get feedback from people when you think you bombed? Because sometimes when we think we bombed, it wasn't nearly as bad as we thought. So is that in your head, or would a colleague say, yeah, that wasn't the best? Do you know for a fact that you bombed? No feedback. I would say the best way to be successful is to prepare ahead of time. Try to give yourself enough time to get your information together, practice your information. Now you know that you can pause and think and breathe, because what happens when things go sideways in a presentation, sometimes it just all falls apart from that. And we don't need to let that happen. Maybe you misspeak, maybe you advance 2 slides instead of 1, and we go, and we freak out. It's so minute, nobody thinks anything of it. Or if they think something like, oh, I've done that before. The skill is not letting a little foible blow you out of the water. And if you have that sense of, oh, this is not going the way I wanted, then you're going to pause and you're going to just think. Maybe you walk back to your slide to give you another few seconds to kind of think of a response. The only prop I would say you can have is this. Some people say, I had a guy once who said, I have to hold my lucky pen. No, you don't. The only thing that you should be touching if you're using a clicker is the clicker. And if you just feel like, I need a second, leave a lot of water there. Unscrew it, drink it, put the top back on. That gives you a little bit of extra time and it doesn't look weird. And frankly, sometimes we just need the water. If, we've had a cold or we have allergies, people get dry throats because they're nervous. So maybe have a prop ready. If you need it, take a beat. But if you make a mistake, you can recover. You really can. And it's generally not nearly as bad and doesn't appear as bad to the audience as you think it is. And I would recommend recording yourself to see what you see and see what's in your head and what's really on video. The video tells the truth. Anybody else? All right. On that note, I really, really appreciate all your time today. I just want to give my contact information here for you. If you have any needs to have a team coached, if you need some personal coaching, I'm available for that. My company is called Utmost Potential. I have my email address. I have my website. I have my LinkedIn link there. Please reach out or jump on LinkedIn and I can get you connected to my newsletter. I just put out tips over time on presentation skills and things around that and other topics as well. So I would love to hear from you. I'm confident that you got some good information today and I hope I make a difference the next time you guys have to present. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. As a person who presents a lot, I can say that this was extremely comprehensive and that this is a journey, not a destination, and we can always be improving our skills. So thank you so much for your expertise.
Absolutely.
Really briefly, I just want to let you guys know of a couple of events coming up. On October 5th is Futureland, which is one of our big events. It includes some of our signature events within it, like Pitch Cypher and Founders Unfiltered. Check it out on our website and be sure to register in advance. Our next monthly webinar is October 18th from 12 to 2 called Level Up Your Leadership. And October 27th at 11:30 is our monthly mini series on the state of AI. Once again, you'll receive the recording of this, you'll receive the slides, you'll receive a survey so that we can share that with Stephanie and so that we can continue to learn and we can all do better at everything that we did today. So thanks again, Stephanie. Thank you everyone for coming and participating and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.